Good morning, good afternoon, and good evening, folks. Hey, welcome to another episode of the Marketing Your Practice podcast, the podcast where I get to simplify the marketing and the mindset necessary so chiropractors can increase their income, their impact, and their enjoyment in practice. In today's episode, I'm going to talk about how to get more of what you want this year. And for those of you that don't really know what you want and you're struggling to make decisions, then I'm going to give you a new way to think about making decisions that'll help you out a whole bunch too. So, important stuff we're going to talk about. So first of all, this time of the year, I'm recording this kind of early January. You'll be listening to it kind of mid-late January. It's a time of year where we're setting New Year's resolutions. We're thinking about all the cool things that we want to do this year. We're setting our goals. And so I want to start with a question. Particularly, we'll keep this kind of focused in around practice as well. So this year, have a think for a moment. Would you like to have more referrals? Would you like to have more of your patients referring more of their friends and family to you? Would you like your retention to improve? Would you like people to come back and be seeing you more often and more consistently? Would you like better follow through with your patients? Would you like your patients doing more of what they say they will do and more of what you ask them to do? You know, the things that we ask them to do on a weekly basis to help them get better results as well. Would you like your patients paying with more ease? If we looked at your social media and maybe your marketing, would you like more comments and interactions? Would you like more sharing of your content? Now, my guess is that most of you are going to say a yes and maybe even a hell yes to all of those questions. Now, just before Christmas, I was studying some planning and I had a quote come up to me. Now, the quote was this, is that the world reflects who you are and not what you want. Now, from the moment that I saw that quote, it started popping up in lots of different ways, different people speaking about it as well. And I started to realize that in many cases, the things that I wanted to happen more in my life, I actually wasn't doing them myself. So let's go back to those questions I asked you before. If you want more referrals, are you the type of person that refers? Like, when was the last time that you told a friend, a loved one about a great business experience, that you've got to go to that cafe, or have you seen this movie, you're just going to love it? In many cases, you know, what I was looking for, I thought, I wonder why more of my clients don't refer to me. And I realized that it had been a long time since I'd referred to somebody. When you think about your attention, if you want your patients, their attention to be better, how good is your follow through? You know, how many courses did you start last year and not finish? How many times did you begin a fitness program and not follow through? Which goes on to that next thing they asked you, do you want better follow through? How good are you at doing what you say that you want to do? What about patients paying with more ease? When bills come into your house, or you're paying for coaching, you're paying for anything, whether it be the kids' school fees, how easily do you pay for that? Now, I'm not necessarily reflecting how much money you've got in your bank account, but as you pay, are you grateful? Are you thankful for the service that you are receiving? In many cases, I have to catch myself when my bills come in, whether they be for the electricity or the water or servicing the car there, is I want to learn to train myself to pay with ease, with gratitude and with thanks. I want to be abundant in my thoughts in around this, as opposed to thinking, oh man, that damn electricity bill again there. And then finally, if you're wanting more comments and interactions and sharing of your content, this was another thing that personally for me, I'm like, I really want to kind of improve the engagement of my content this year. And I noticed that very often that when I'm scrolling through, whether I'm on YouTube or whether I'm on Instagram, I tend to scroll through aimlessly. Now, I might see a post that I really love, but often I don't stop and comment and thank the person. I don't acknowledge the impact that it's had. Often I don't even double tap for a like. So I'm asking my audience, you guys, to do things that I'm not even doing. And that doesn't seem to be a reasonable request for me. This idea of the world reflects who we are, not what we want, is something that's a real truth for me. Now, there are many of the kind of more esoteric teachings that will talk about this, and this whole concept can become a little bit woo-woo. And maybe it is, maybe it's not, but in doing some preparation for this, I was looking at other explanations of what might be going on here. The reticular activating system probably provides a pretty good explanation of why the world tends to reflect back to us who we are, not necessarily what we want. An interesting study I came across was done on parents who lived near a really busy airport. These were parents with young babies. And here's what's interesting, what they found out is that many times these parents have trained themselves to sleep completely through a plane taking off. So a really, really noisy plane, which was massively loud, that for most people, if we slept there, it would wake us up. But the moment the baby cried, the parents would wake. Now, what got kind of even interesting in this is more often than not, again, not a surprise, is the mum would wake, but often the dad wouldn't. But if the mum went away for a number of days, then all of a sudden the dad would wake up. Our reticular activating system is the part of the brain. Now, for those of you that are neurology whizzes, excuse me here if I'm simplifying this. I know I am simplifying it too. That is constantly filtering out information, and it's saying what is valuable for us and what's not. It's part of the brain that's useful. When we first learned to drive a car, it was complex. It seemed like there was lots going on, but now many of us can hop in the car and drive without really thinking about it at all, is because the reticular activating system is filtering information out and it's telling us what's relevant for us and what's not. And so this idea of that the world sees who we are, not what we want, is perhaps a function of the reticular activating system there. And so if you want to have more referrals, start to see more referrals, start to be a person that refers more, make this be part of your life. If you're wanting your retention to improve, then you and yourself start to have better follow through. What is your retention like in the work that you're doing as well? And again, if you're wanting more comments and interactions and sharing of your content, then be the person that does that. This year for me, when I'm thinking about the things that I'm wanting, I'm going to be the person that already does those things. I want the world to reflect back who I am in those situations. Now, what about for those of you that perhaps when you're setting goals for this year or not setting goals, you're having difficulty deciding what it is that you want? I've been through phases of this beforehand where I don't know what I want. Now, I want to share with you, we are so ingrained in when making decisions, is that I want you to visually think about this, is that when we're making a decision, the process that goes on inside the brain for most of us is this. So we imagine ourselves standing at a fork in the road, and off to the left is the right decision, and off to the right is the wrong decision. And so we spend a whole bunch of time not wanting to make the wrong decision. In fact, the neurology in most of us have a strong negativity bias. We will work much harder to move away from pain than we will move towards pleasure. Now, this means that we become a little bit obsessed about not wanting to make the wrong decision. We're penalized for making the wrong decision entirely right the way through our schooling system, for many of us in our working environments, our part-time jobs, and sometimes also in our jobs as chiropractors, we're penalized for making the wrong decisions. So therefore, we fixate on it. We don't want to make the wrong decision. And what happens, and what used to happen to me and what happens to many of the clients that I deal with, instead of wanting to make a wrong decision, we'll make no decision at all. Does it sound familiar? I know that was a big thing for me. I became literally paralyzed by this until I started to see that maybe there was a different way of looking at things. I'm going to explain that in a moment, but let me ask you a question here first. If you were to look back over your life, and this question comes up often in different areas, and people ask if you could go back to part of your life and you could have a do-over, where you could do something differently, maybe or a decision that you made in the past, a mistake, what would you go back and change about your life? Now, when I'm asked this question, and when I hear many of my mentors ask this question, they often come back and they say, there's nothing that I would change. In fact, I might have told you, I'm going to just remind you here about the story of Art Berg. Art Berg has passed away now. I was first introduced to him at a Tony Robbins seminar. I was going to say Tony Robbins concert. They're kind of a bit like concerts, but a Tony Robbins seminar a number of years ago. And Art was traveling to his wedding in Las Vegas late in the night. His buddy was driving the car, and the car ran off the road, ran into like a concrete barrier, and it threw Art from the car. He broke his neck on the desert floor. Now, when he woke up, he had lost sensation in his arms and his legs. He'd fractured his upper thoracic spine, lower neck, and he was told that he was a quadriplegic. He had a little bit of movement in his arms, but not much movement in his arms at all. And his life changed drastically that day. He did go on to marry his wife. He went on to father children. He went on to have a huge impact on tens of thousands and possibly millions of people. Art tells a story how he says, there may be 15 or 20,000 things that you can do in life, from parachuting to skydiving. They're the same thing, to snorkeling and scuba diving is what I was trying to say there too as well. He said, and because of the injury that I have, he says, maybe I can only do a third of those. He said, I bet though that at the end of my life, he says, I do more of those 15,000 things than you do. He did a lot of things in his life. He was asked, and often gets asked, that if he could go back to that night again when he was driving to his wedding in Las Vegas, would he do it differently? Would he have tried to keep his buddy awake? Would he have driven a different way? And the answer that he says, I listened to this little talk of his a lot. I refound it again just recently. The answer is quite chilling, because he says he wouldn't change a thing. He said he didn't succeed in his life in spite of what's gone on, in spite of the injury. He succeeded in his life because of it. He goes on to say that life didn't happen, and this injury didn't happen to him, it happened for him. And so there's an amazing thing that happens amongst many of my mentors and a lot of the people that I see as successful, is that when they look back on the difficult times in their past, it's not something that they would change. Even the most difficult of times, they learned something from them that then helped them get to where they are now. Certainly when I look back on challenging relationships, jobs that didn't go the way that I wanted them to go, friendships that didn't go the way, stupid things I did as a teenager, each of those have been pivotal learning experiences that have helped me get to where I am right now, and for a life that I'm so deeply, deeply grateful for. So when I think about it in that manner, and maybe if you think about it in that manner, if I then come back to that fork in the road and I'm wanting to make a decision, instead of me thinking that there's a right decision and a wrong decision, what I think about is that there's a right decision and a right decision. Because regardless of what decision I make, there's always going to be a great learning. Even those times in the past for me, where I look back on it and it turned out to be incredibly difficult, what some people might have seen as a wrong decision, I got great learnings from it that then allowed me to build into who I am now. Now, for some of you, and I was going through this process with a bunch of my community influencer clients the other day, invariably somebody will say to me, you know what, Angus, if I'd look back on my life, yeah, there are some things I would definitely change, because it brought me to a situation where I'm not happy with now, and flat out it's caused a great deal of difficulty. And if it feels that way to you, then I want to reflect back to this. It only feels this way for you at the moment is because you're not at the end just yet. In fact, there's a great quote, and I'm going to think about where it came from. It was a movie I was watching. It might have even been, I can't think of the movie, but it basically was this, is in the end, it all turns out okay. And if it's not okay at the moment, then it's not the end. That's said a little bit more eloquently than that, but that's the case. So if you're looking back on those scenarios and you think, Angus, that might be the case for you, but I would change those things in a heartbeat, I want you to know it's not the end of the game yet. So you're looking back on it and it looks like it was difficult and painful, but it's just not the end of the movie. Remember, I told a story earlier in an episode about a World Cup soccer game, the European Championships. It was a game between France and Sweden. And I think at like the 82nd or 83rd minute of a 90-minute game, Sweden were down 3-1. Impossible to come back with. They score a goal at the 82nd minute, 3-2. They scored another goal at the 89th minute, 3-3. They then get into penalties and they win. Now, how you look back on your life and the way that you look at it there too is completely up to you. But my contention would be this. If you're looking back on things and you're seeing them as a mistake, if you're seeing that as a horrible decision that you make, it doesn't bring power to you. In fact, I think it brings a level of impotence. Looking back on it, looking for the learning, looking at what it's allowed you to experience and what opportunities it's bringing you forwards is a powerful way of looking at things. When you're going to make decisions heading forwards in 2022, I would contend that the best thought process to look at it with, instead of thinking that there's a right and a wrong decision, what if there's just two right decisions? How does that feel for you? In many cases, what that does is it gives a tremendous amount of freedom for people. It gives you a freedom to move forwards. And it's in making decisions that power comes from. when you sit there obsessing over not wanting to make a decision, when you sit there paralysed, the two, then that in itself is a decision. That's what we've got to think about. No decision is actually a decision. So some thoughts for you to think about in 2022 is, for those of you that know what you want, is I'm going to encourage you to be more of that yourself. And for those of you that don't know what you want at all and are stuck in, how do I make this big decision, is that instead of thinking there's a right and wrong decision, what about if there are just two right decisions? I'd love you to know your thoughts on that. Okay, if you're listening to this on, who knows where, maybe you're watching it on YouTube, over on my website, maybe you're listening to this just through your podcast listening app, whatever it is, there too, send me a message. Let me know what your wants are. Let me know what you think about this concept of there being no wrong decision, but just two right decisions as well. Until next time, gang, thanks for all that you do. Keep saving lives. I tell you this all the time, your community does desperately, desperately need you as a leader, as a teacher, as somebody who stands up and creates a path that shows them where real health comes from, that the body is self-healing, that the nervous system is the master system. That's more of what our world needs to hear right now. All right, gang, see you real soon. Bye. If you've enjoyed listening to this podcast, you have to come and check out my Community Influencer Program. It's my monthly coaching program where we take all this material and I'll work with you to help you apply it, implement it, and systemize it. The Community Influencer Group Coaching Program is designed to help you increase your practice income, impact, and enjoyment. Join me over at anguspyke.com/join. That's anguspyke.com/join. I'd love to see you there.